So welcome. Has begun. Welcome, everybody. Hope that you're having a great Friday morning so far. I've set our meetings to record. We're going to go ahead and get started with our webinar today. Today we have Janie Sacco from St. Martin's University and Michelle Primley Benton from University of Washington in Seattle, which will be presenting about the NWACUHO Diversity and Inclusion Statement. As we get started, just wanted to bring your awareness to a few things. Number one, my name is Laura Lambeth, and I'm our technology director. That's how you'll see my title over here on the right-hand side as host. You all are participants. You don't have microphone rights. You don't need to have the ability to call in necessarily. But if you are having any connectivity issues with your audio, please let me know via the chat function. As we go through, I'll be monitoring the chat so that Janie and Michelle can focus on their presentation, and they'll be gathering questions or feedback for their presentation at the end of the session. But you're welcome to chat your questions, and I can collect those for the end once they're done. If you have any other issues, please just chat with me. You can also do that individually, so feel free to let us know if you have any issues. And we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll turn over our presentation to Janie and Michelle about our diversity and inclusion statement.
Great. Well, welcome. Good morning, everybody. So as Laura mentioned, this is Michelle Primley Benton, the previous Washington State representative for NWACUHO, and I'm so excited to be joined by Janie Sacco, who is our new Washington representative for NWACUHO. And we're presenting together this morning because we have kind of jointly now been sharing some of the work for the diversity and inclusion statement. So we're going to be bouncing back and forth to talk a little bit about what's been done so far and look at where we're going to be going. So diversity and inclusion, equity and inclusion is a really important NWACUHO value. And it's something that for as long as I was on the board has been a very high topic of discussion. But right now, because we're entering into a new master planning process, and we had some bandwidth this year to be able to look at additional task force opportunities and committee opportunities, really wanted to make sure that we were codifying that value rather than having it be something that we talked about, that we shared as a value for the region, but not necessarily having it show up officially in our business and our opportunities for folks. So today we're going to be talking about steps that have been taken so far in this process, what other regions are doing. I think it's really important to know what other folks throughout ACUHO are doing when it relates to diversity and inclusion, our recommendations for year one, and then where we can grow, because we know that this is a topic that is constantly evolving, that different issues come up and have different values throughout our region, and we want to make sure that this is not something that is just a statement that's put out there, we give ourselves a high five and then move on, that we recognize that this is an area where we continue to learn and grow as professionals and as a region. So to start with, we have begun with kind of growing the conversation over the past several years. So we have had conversations both at a committee level with the Professional Development Committee as it's existed over the past several years, but also at a board level, and particularly at the annual conference, about a need for recognizing the diverse array of professionals in our region and the diverse array of students that we serve throughout the region, and being able to provide support and learning opportunities. So one of the first pieces that was introduced was the Affinity Social, which began with our Tacoma conference a few years ago. We were fortunate to have Campus Communities as a sponsor for that piece, and really had that as a time to come together and recognize professionals from underrepresented identities as well as allies, be able to say that this is a value. We want professionals to be able to network with each other and identify other folks in the region, because we are a very large region, but not necessarily large in terms of the number of humans within it. And so really important for folks to be able to have face time with other professionals with shared identities as well as allies. Another step in that was opening up town hall conversations. And so We began some conversations a couple years ago about where we wanted to see potential opportunities for diversity and inclusion. And a really great piece of that conversation was the language is really important to begin with. So as you all probably know, coming from a variety of institutions, some folks are very fond of the term diversity, some are very fond of the idea of inclusion, some are very fond of the term equity, and conversely, folks have some negative reactions to each of those terms as well. And so thinking about how do we even encapsulate this idea of being an inclusive organization and inclusive region. So the town hall conversations really illuminated the fact that we needed to do more officially and that there needed to be some pieces codified in how we do business as a board and as a region. So throughout this past year, there have been some focused conversations with regional leaders, and we have a variety of institutional types and values throughout our region. So we have everything from very large public institutions to community colleges with housing, to small religious affiliated institutions, to small private but non-religiously affiliated institutions. And so all of those institutions come with some different values and some different restrictions to their own capabilities in terms of housing and what equity and inclusion means for their own values. Size and demographics of the region also played a tremendous role in the conversations that we had. So again, as I mentioned, we're a fairly diverse region, but not necessarily as ethnically diverse as some other areas of the country, and especially in terms of our professional staff. And so being really mindful of the fact that for some identities, there might only be a couple of professionals in the region who share that identity. And so what does that mean for us as we move forward with things like affinity socials, with groups, with committee structure? So all of these are pieces that we kept in mind as we were going into the conversation. A place that we began as a group was to look at what are other regions doing. And so we spent a significant amount of time doing a deep dive into our other regional websites and talking with folks who are in some of the other NWACUHO regions. What we found is that having a committee or task force addressing equity and inclusion or diversity was universal. So every other NWACUHO region had a committee or task force in existence that was represented somewhere on the website. What we found was also that web presence was very inconsistent. And so some regions, it was very easy to find what they did around diversity. It was front and center on their website. For others, it took a lot of digging, sometimes up to 6 clicks to even be able to find a starting point. And so that web presence piece was not necessarily consistent across what our peers are doing. Many of the regions have a diversity statement, but not all. Some address it as a point in their core values. Some have a separate diversity statement, and a couple also have an anti-bias statement in addition to having a general diversity statement. Most other regions also have some form of award. So this is something that can go out to an individual or to a member institution, though most of the awards that we found were individual. Some regions chose to do that with an award per state or province represented in their region. Some chose to do one overall award for the region. And some did some ongoing recognition in terms of of the month awards for different institutions and individuals. What we found consistently was that the committee for each of those regions played a pretty significant role in award selection where those were in existence. So this, for some of the committees, this was essentially their purpose, was to advertise for this award as well as to be able to actually select a recipient as well. And they also had a small number of scholarships. So about 3 other regions had scholarships. And in terms of the number that have an award, I would say it was over 75%. There were only a couple that did not have an award that they bestow each year. In addition, some of the other regions, probably about half, had programming tracks or had their committees focus on representation in programming at the conference. So a couple of regions had actual programming tracks, diversity and inclusion programming tracks. They also tended to have very delineated tracks. So in addition to sort of mid-level, new professional, operations, facilities, res life, a lot of them had, for instance, a supervision track or an advising track. And so got into some really, really specific tracks if they also included a diversity and inclusion track there. But many of them focused on just general representation in their programming. And so it was very common, again, about half of them, the committee focused on looking at program submissions and making sure that there was a diverse representation in the programs that were happening there. There was less information about general representation in the region, so things like recruitment, although NWACUHO had an area that was very dedicated to drawing diverse professionals to the region and providing supports and providing best practices for institutions in terms of hiring and interview processes. They had one of the more robust diversity and equity committee charges out of any of the regions that we looked at.
Great. So in Alaska, we had the opportunity to host a roundtable discussion and get a lot of feedback from our members. And so we're hoping to get some additional feedback today from folks. And what we have found from all of the work that Michelle has done from looking at the different regions that we have is 3 things that we would like to do, and of course with room to expand on those. The first is that we'd like to have a Northwest NWACUHO Equity and Inclusion Award, and I'll get into that in a moment. The second thing is that we would like to have a Northwest NWACUHO Diversity Inclusion Committee, and I think this is the area where we are most looking to kind of give it a starting point this year, and then the role of the committee in the first year is to really grow itself and kind of help us define what that is going to look like as we continue on. And the last thing is that we're excited to implement a diversity statement for the region that we feel will encompass the identities of our members as well as have that be a really living document. So the idea that we got from the research as well as from our discussions with member institutions was that this is going to be very much, as Michelle said, a living, breathing thing we're working on. It's not just a box we're checking off, but rather something we're making sure is intentional within Northwest NWACUHO and something that we're continuously revisiting. So with that context and the idea in mind, these are the 3 platforms we would like to start with in the next year and then hopefully grow those so that diversity and inclusion is really an important part of our regional work. So what I want to talk a little bit about is the Equity and Inclusion Award. We are very excited to bring this forward, and the idea is that it would be an award that recognizes either an individual or a member school who has demonstrated work towards awareness and understanding. At first when we thought of this was thought of, it was really thought to be an individual, but we thought a member school would also be a really great idea, and that was a little bit of the feedback we got from the roundtable about including that. The idea is that the winner of the Equity and Inclusion Award will be recognized during the annual conference, as well as on the webpage and our post-conference newsletter, and that's really to highlight what exciting and awesome things are going in our region so that others can hopefully emulate the ideas that our members are putting forward. So as I stated before, the recipient can be an individual or a member institution, so we're going to go ahead and include both those as options with the Equity and Inclusion Award. We're also going to focus on how the nominee has enhanced equity and inclusion on their campus. So we're really, because we have so many different types of institutions, it's our hope that the nomination will include a bit about the campus climate, what the individual or the member school has done and how that specifically impacted this, because we certainly want to take into account how each institutional climate is very different and how we can work within those different capacities to encourage diversity as well as equity and inclusion. And the last thing is we want to recognize significant challenges that individuals or institutions may have faced. So individuals starting an initiative in a school where there is not much diversity, or institutions who have worked really well to collaborate with other departments on campus. Those are all things that we want to see in those awards, and so we're making sure those are specifically included in the description so nominators know that they can include that piece as well, and it's something that the committee will look at. The other piece we wanted to talk about in terms of this aspect was the idea that the Scholarship and Awards Committee as well as the Diversity and Inclusion Committee would work jointly to create a transparent rubric. So our idea was that we could really utilize both committees to do this very effectively, and this would be a way in which the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, which we'll talk about in a moment, can kind of have an impact in this area. And the idea of creating a transparent rubric was very important to members when we talked about the roundtable as well as from feedback from other regions. So that way people know, like, this is what we're looking for, this is what we value as Northwest NWACUHO in terms of excellence in the region regarding diversity. And then we are also, something that we're going to need to work on forward, and this can hopefully be a role of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, is how to recognize winners and nominees, because something that was pointed out to us, which is very true, is that while we might have an overall winner, there's amazing things that are going on in the region, and how do we recognize those, encourage folks to present our annual conference, and really get that information out there so that people can understand kind of what good work is going on in the region. Regarding diversity and inclusion. So those are the areas we're going to continue to look at in terms of the Equity Inclusion Award, but what we have solidified so far is the idea that, yes, we're definitely going to recognize either a member or a member school, and then the idea is that in the future, should we get an overwhelming amount of nominations, that we could then perhaps split that and have 2 awards. So right now we're going to go ahead and look at doing 1. So if you have any questions or comments on this, feel free to include those in the chat window, and we'll definitely get back to those at the end of the presentation.
Great. So the next significant component of this, as Janie mentioned, is the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. So for those of you who have been a part of the organization for a while, you know that committees and task forces have looked a variety of different ways over the years, and I think that this is something that is really important to us as a region, but we're constantly striving to figure out what is the best format for committees to really ensure that members have an opportunity to be engaged and involved in driving the business of the region forward, but making sure that they're doing meaningful work and feel like that is of value for the organization and really a worthwhile pursuit for them, knowing that that can take some time away from their home institution. So when we thought about options for this committee, we wanted it to be really robust, and we wanted to be able to offer an opportunity for members to have some really great decision making, but also some really great opportunities to interface with the board as well. And so what we outlined as a purpose for the Diversity and Inclusion Committee is to provide opportunities for the education and professional development in the areas of equity and inclusion, both at the annual conference and throughout the year. The Diversity and Inclusion Committee supports efforts that increase awareness throughout the region. So all of our committees identify some core objectives, and these core objectives typically stay fairly similar from year to year, but may shift, and then you'll see in the next slide the suggested objectives to get at these cores. So our identified core objectives for the first year of the committee are to work in conjunction with the programming committee for the Northwest Akuho Annual Conference in Spokane to recruit program proposals representing diverse topics and institutions, and assist in selection of programming slate representative of equity and diversity goals. And so there are 2 really important components within that. We really want to see a diverse topic slate and see those equity and diversity conversations be highlighted in our programmatic content. Frequently in the roundtable sessions over the past couple years, these topics have been very, very popular, but they have not necessarily shown up in program proposals. And so we want to make sure that that is something that is really sought after, and that we're preparing folks to be able to submit really quality proposals and have a great slate. But we also know that there are some institutions that are not as involved in the region, and we want to make sure that we are getting a diverse array of institutions presenting at the conference and really opening those doors. And I think that this first year, aligning with our location in Spokane, which is fairly accessible for a lot of folks in our region, that there's a really good opportunity here. In addition, one of the core objectives is to select the award recipient for the Diversity and Inclusion Award, to support and create content for the Soundings blog and other professional development venues within Northwest Akuho, so that could include things like the First Friday webinars as well, or drive-ins, and then assist the board of directors and the local arrangements team in creating an inclusive conference environment. And so that can be everything from the affinity social to thinking about who are our keynotes, how are we working with conference centers on things like restroom access, accessibility of different venues, and really making sure that we have a lot of conversation going on around how to make a really inclusive conference environment each year. So the suggested objectives to get at those cores: develop a plan for solicitation of nominations for the Diversity and Inclusion Award, along with the Awards and Scholarship Committee. So we know that the Awards and Scholarship Committee works very hard to get information out to our membership about the different awards and scholarships available, and having the Diversity and Inclusion Committee work in tandem with them to solicit these specific nominations is going to be really critical. Anytime that you're rolling out a new concept, it's important that as much information gets out to membership as possible. In addition, we want them to encourage members to submit session proposals addressing areas of equity and diversity, both for the annual conference as well as First Friday webinars and drive-ins. And so coming up with a solid marketing push for that is going to be important. Generate content for the Soundings blog. We're identifying quarterly as a goal. This is something that can be helpful in keeping the blog really fresh and engaged with new content, but also keeps this as a forefront of conversation throughout the year rather than just being a topic that's addressed at the annual conference. In addition, we would want the committee to provide feedback to the board and local arrangements team for improving inclusivity and access, again, based on location and resources in the area, and assist in planning and facilitating the Affinity Social at the annual conference. And so I think that this in particular is a really great opportunity for growth and really making that a very engaging opportunity. You know, we've been very proud of the fact that folks have been able to make great connections at that social each year, and I think that we're in a great spot to really take that to another level and really engage the folks in thoughtful conversation as part of that.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. And so the last thing we wanted to talk about was NWACUHO Diversity Statement. So I'm going to go ahead and read this out for the webinar. For folks who will be watching this later. So NWACUHO is committed to the active inclusion of involvement of all interested members in its programs, committee, and leadership in the region. NWACUHO strives to continually increase access and engagement in its efforts. As an association, NWACUHO is committed to responsible citizenship and demonstrating a value of equity and inclusivity in our programs and practice. And NWACUHO recognizes the unique and valuable contributions of our members, inclusive of race, ethnicity, age, gender, religious preference, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, differing abilities, socioeconomic status, veteran status, immigration status, and other social identities. And we encourage all to actively participate in the association's events and initiatives. And so for this statement, we got a lot of really great feedback again from the roundtable, and we decided to go with this version of the statement, which really calls to attention all of the different identities we hope to include in the region, as well as others that we may not have yet thought of. And so I think this really speaks to the need for us to recognize our population of not only professionals, but as well as the students we serve. And so our diversity statement is going to, again, be very much a living, breathing part of the organization. So we're going to first implement this piece of it, and then something we can certainly revisit as we need to throughout the years to come. So we're hoping this will be a really good, solid starting point. And this, again, as Michelle said earlier, is very similar to what our other institutions are doing. So the idea is to have this be a prominent part of what we have available on our website to members, something that we all know and we can look back to and really think about how are we as an institutions as well as a region embodying this diversity statement. How are we being inclusive of all our members in terms of the resources we provide, as well as providing the content so that we can continue to grow ourselves and learn more about diversity, social justice, and equity, and how we can work with that with our students in our institutions. So that is what we have thus far.
Janie, can I add a little bit to that?
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
So I think one of the pieces, you know, crafting a diversity statement is a really complicated process, and there were a lot of different considerations with this. In talking with folks, a lot of the leaders in our region really valued the idea of a statement being, it needs to be aspirational to a point, but not so aspirational that it's unachievable. And so we really want to make sure that for any statement that's being made, that it is something that we feel as a region we can truly commit to. And so there was a lot of back and forth about how to phrase particular areas. Do we list out social identities, or do we just generally say social identities? And so there were some really great, robust conversations, both individually as well as at the round table, to come to the wording here. And again, we know, as Janie said, that this is a living piece that may shift, but really trying to address a lot of the concerns throughout the region and be somewhat at parallel with some of our other ACUHO regions throughout the area. Janie, I'm not able to hear you. Are you still there?
I am. I apologize. I left myself on mute, so I'm going to go ahead and pick up where I left off. As Michelle mentioned earlier, one of the things that this is a master plan year. So as a board of directors and as a region, as we move forward with the master plan, thinking about how over the next 5 years, how will these components evolve, how will this platform be really a place for us to start and then grow in terms of the region. And the diversity statement is a really good place to start. Again, it is very much something that is aspirational to a certain extent, as well as something that we can certainly attain. We also want to make sure we're connecting to our core purposes. So the values that we hold dear in Northwest NWACUHO as well as NWACUHO I, how is our diversity statement and our diversity plan meeting those needs? How are we becoming the best practitioners that we can possibly be? Another area we're hoping to grow in the future is the affinity group social. So we currently have a social lit sub, which is really great and really inclusive of our members, but how can we make that more specific? How can we make sure it's a safe space for all who attend and make sure it's something that is continuously growing and meeting the needs of our membership? And how do we extend that beyond the annual conference? As we mentioned, we're a very vast and large region, but we want to make sure that folks are feeling connected and finding community within our region. We also, in the future, want to talk about how we can expand the award to scholarship opportunities as well. So how can we encourage folks to attend our conferences, give people the most opportunities possible from a variety of schools, a variety of identities, and make sure that we're being as inclusive as possible. And then lastly, the scope of the committee. So the committee has a couple of really great guiding principles to start off, but where can this committee grow? How can we make sure it's its own individual strong piece of Northwest NWACUHO and that the work they do has a meaningful impact in the region? So these three areas are certainly something that are going to be a really great start, and I'm very excited to see where this can grow and where we can take the opportunity. And of course, the last thing I'd like to mention is that this will definitely be member-driven. So while this is our platform that we're hoping to enact in May at our board meeting, this is certainly something that is going to be growing and something that we hope to see continue in the region. So for our next steps, in an effort to increase more visibility of this, as well as get more member involvement, we're going to have our state and provincial representatives reach out to institutions to really share these documents to let people know that this is what direction we're looking to go into. We're also, like I said, going to talk a bit more about it at our annual board meeting in May. It certainly is on the agenda, and so we're hoping to have some of these pieces, if not all of them, passed, so it's something we can start acting on, again, and make sure it's a good part of our 5-year plan. We're also going to roll this out in advance of the summer session. So as folks head to Seattle for the summer, and I hope to see you all there, we'll be able to talk about this and perhaps have a meeting of the minds, if you will, in Seattle as well, and get people to see this. So there's a lot of really great opportunities coming in the next few months where we're going to get some more eyes on our diversity statement and our diversity plan in general, and have it be very much an organic member-informed document. If you have any immediate feedback, we're going to go ahead and take that in the next slide, so we hope to hear some comments and questions that folks have. But you can certainly contact both Michelle or myself to give that feedback and to let us know what you hope to see. And then I also have a great list of folks who were at the roundtable who are interested in helping out with that, so I haven't forgotten that piece. But if you would like to be added to that list and involved, please do let us know. And before we open it up to questions, I just want to give a shout out to Michelle. She's done so much hard work on this plan and really kind of designed the platform that we're going to be going forward with as a region. So I just wanted to thank her so much for her contributions, because it's very exciting, and we're very excited to move forward.
Thank you. So at this point, what questions and feedback do you all have? Feel free to type in the chat box. Thanks, Nathan. We're excited you could join us this morning. So as folks are typing in questions and comments, as Kate's pointed out in the chat box, in addition to S&P reps being able to do some outreach to institutions and gather that feedback, Kate's going to be spotlighting this in the June newsletter as well. So really hoping to be able to get as much feedback as possible. As Janie said, I think this is an area where it's particularly critical that there's a lot of member involvement. And so our hope is that this is going to be a really robust committee, a very engaged committee, and an opportunity for members to really shape the direction for the region. And I'm very excited to have Janie be so excited to take this on now in her new board role. So I feel very grateful that it's going into fantastic hands to help shepherd it forward. So Nathan asked out of curiosity when S&P reps will be reaching out. So I'll let you take that one, Janie.
Absolutely. So I am actually crafting my April outreach to Washington State this week, so I'm hoping to put the call out and put the documents out in that newsletter for people to see. And then we're also going to be sending that out to the state and provincial reps, and so I hope that this month they'll be reaching out to folks before our May board meeting so we can get some feedback. That's a great question. So hopefully you'll hear from your state and provincial rep sometime in April.
Excellent. So Kate pointed out in terms of aiding the board's planning for the conference being inclusive, more specifically to include issues of diversity and inclusion with our keynote and featured speakers topics. That is definitely a topic that's coming up right now in the local arrangements team meetings for the Spokane conference as well. So I think that that's potentially a really great opportunity and something that once this committee gets going, hopefully they can dovetail. But the idea has been placed in the local arrangement team's ears for this coming conference season already. So I think that'll be a really great piece.
Awesome. And I see a question from Laura about how, if there's a number of people we're looking for in this committee. There, as many as possible is my answer. I would love to see as many people as possible involved in the committee. I think we're hoping to get a chair sometime soon, and if we have interest, I'd love to see 2 co-chairs really take this on. I think that the more voices you have in this, the better. It can be a bit of diversity and inclusion can be a bit of a big topic. So I think the more members we have in the committee, the easier it'll be for us to kind of divide up the different aspirations that we have and really make sure that they are a reality. So we are going to be looking for a chair and hopefully 2 co-chairs to lead this charge.
Absolutely. I think that this is the type of committee that it is very easy to accommodate a large number of folks to be able to break into those subcommittees. But it's also something that if we have a small but mighty and driven crew, I think that they can do really great work as well. So the more the merrier, but I think great things will happen regardless of the number.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Oh, Nathan, yeah, that's a great question. Yes, I did take down names, and I will be reaching out to those folks hopefully in May at the latest is my hope, and keep those folks updated about where we're going with this. So it's a great question.
Excellent. And Laura asked a really great question about looking at other regions' websites, things that were helpful or great ideas to adapt. You know, I think a couple things that can be really helpful just from a user interface perspective is making sure that there's a quality search function was really important because some sites I was able to just search for diversity, equity, inclusion, and pull up a number of things that were very helpful, and that was great. Others, their search function wasn't great, and so I needed to do a lot of kind of click exploring. I think that in terms of organization, making sure that even if you do have a great search function, you know, if we're saying that this is a strong value for Northwest Akuho, I think it's really important that you can access it in a maximum of 2 clicks from the homepage to be able to find it. But it was also really helpful to be able to see some of the different resources that were available. So some folks had within that area some duplication of, you might find blog posts or publication topics, and even though they also existed, say, in the newsletter section, they were replicated in that kind of diversity and inclusion area of the site as well. And of course, always having information on how you can join and get involved is very helpful. Knowing who to be able to speak to.
Are there any last questions or feedback that anybody has about anything that we covered today?
Okay. Well, thank you all again for joining us. Go ahead, Janie.
Janie.
Oh, sorry. This certainly isn't the last opportunity to provide feedback on this. So again, if you do have any questions, I'm going to go ahead and toggle back to our contact information. So feel free to reach out to either of us. We'd be happy to hear any feedback folks have.
Well, Janie and Michelle, again, thank you so much for presenting all of this great information. It's wonderful to get the full scope of what you all have looked at and the different steps that we'll be taking as an organization. And I know from conversations I've had with other members that this is really exciting, and there's some a sort of excited anticipation about what's going to be coming next and how we're able to improve resources and opportunities in our region. So again, thank you so much for your time and for putting this together. And for those of you that are here today, thank you for participating and joining in on our call. And for anyone who will be watching at this time later, you can always go to our website and look for more information about these topics or how to get in touch with either our presenters or with the association. So thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. And I'd just like to highlight before we go just a few things. First of all, we do have a webinar feedback form. In the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see an important links text box. If you click on that first link, there's feedback for our webinar. So if you can let us know what you thought of this webinar, if it was helpful, if there's anything that we didn't address that you would have liked to see, please let us know. The feedback is what helps us get better. Additionally, we have links to our website and to our committee page. We do have 3 committees at this time, and of course, we're looking at more steps for involvement with a committee regarding diversity and inclusion. What we also want to make sure that you know is that there is some opportunity for committee chairs. So if you have any interest in that, please take a look at our committee information on our website. And the last announcement you'll see on the text box on your lower left is that any sort of interested parties need to send a resume and interest letter to Bob Lambert at alberta@northwestdacuho.org by the end of business today so that we can know who is interested in those opportunities. And then finally, we do record these webinars. You can find it on our YouTube channel, and we'll upload that in the next week. And our next webinar is going to be highlighting our programming. Our next few webinars will be highlighting the Best of the Northwest and our top 5 programs from the annual conference. So keep an eye out for more information about those programs if you weren't able to attend them at the conference or if you weren't able to attend the conference. Again, thank you so much for spending your Friday morning with us. We hope you have a good weekend and rest of your day. And have a great week, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.